Harper Audio presents Nixon and Kissinger, Partners in Power by Robert Dallek. Read by Eric Conger. Copyright 2007 by Robert Dallek. Production and abridgment copyright 2007 by HarperCollins Publishers. This audiobook is about the exercise of power by two of the most important practitioners of the art in the 20th century, President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger, whose unprecedented influence as a national security advisor and Secretary of State made him a kind of co-president, especially during the administration's turmoil over Watergate. We know almost all of what they did during their 5.5 years in the White House. Their major initiatives were and remain landmarks in the history of American foreign policy. Why and how they acted, however, is incomplete and imperfectly understood, partly hidden behind the facade the two men consciously and unconsciously erected to disguise their intentions. The Nixon and Kissinger persona do not lend themselves to easy understanding. But neither man is less understandable than Franklin Roosevelt, John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and Ronald Reagan, other political leaders I have studied. This is not to suggest that all these men are alike or lack distinctive traits. Each one had his unique qualities that made him a challenge to explain. And while practice in political biography never makes perfect, it has encouraged me to believe that none of these men are so complicated that we cannot describe the private men behind the public images. I hope my recounting of the Nixon and Kissinger life stories will cast fresh light on who they were and why and how they collaborated in their use and abuse of power. A vast array of previously untapped records has served my reconstruction of their histories. The recent opening of the bulk of these materials, millions of pages of national security files, 2,800 hours out of 3,700 hours of Nixon tapes, and 20,000 pages of Kissinger telephone transcripts that were made by aides listening in on the conversations, makes another re-examination of the men and their leadership particularly timely and instructive. The Nixon-Kissinger partnership presents the historical biographer with a striking irony. The two men presided over a government that was unequaled in its secrecy, but the availability of the richest presidential records in history makes their White House more transparent than any before or since. The materials provide an unprecedented opportunity to probe Nixon's and Kissinger's policymaking. Specifically, mining administration records has allowed me to reconstruct the interactions between Nixon and Kissinger and others in the government, the collaborations and rivalries, the backstabbing, intrigues, and foul language, or expletive deleted, in contemporary White House transcripts, to an unparalleled extent. The great events of Nixon's presidency, ending the Vietnam War, opening a new era in Sino-American relations, building détente with the Soviet Union, managing daunting Middle East problems, favoring Pakistan in the Indo-Pakistan War, seeking the overthrow of Salvador Allende Gassen's government in Chile, using foreign affairs to counter growing cries for impeachment of the president over Watergate, and hiding Nixon's erratic behavior in response to the crisis, can also be more fully recreated than ever before. The archival riches provide the most authoritative answers to a number of enduring questions. Foremost, the 4 additional years of fighting in Vietnam cry out for explanation. Could the war have been ended sooner? And could the Saigon regime have been saved from itself and a communist takeover by Hanoi? In light of the end results in Vietnam, Kissinger's selection for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973 is another point of controversy. The opening to China is a largely celebrated event, usually cited as the most important achievement of Nixon's and Kissinger's foreign policy. But how it occurred and which man deserves the principal credit for realizing it still provokes debate. Questions about its usefulness in balancing the communist superpower in Peking against the one in Moscow also remain. Arguments about the wisdom and value of détente with the Soviet Union continue to be worthy of consideration as well. Were the SALT and trade agreements as essential to international stability and peace as Nixon and Kissinger believed? Neoconservative critics of détente complain that the rapprochement
Sample complete. Ready to continue?